we want to leave them with a sweet feeling about this course, by the way. Read laterally. You have been taught to read vertically. You've been taught to read, you've all been taught to read vertically. So what does vertically mean? I know you've seen
Pull
this.
back together, everyone.
How do we know this is true? We're going to get to this. This was a great story in the summer about the fact that because you use your phone so much, you're all hunched over, you're growing horns on your spine. My grandson, who's 20, saw this, and before he got through the first paragraph, he said, I don't believe this can't be right, etc. Okay, this was in the Washington Post. It gets to reading laterally. What do I mean by reading laterally? When you read something or you read a story and you want to analyze it, you say, well, what do I know? What don't I know? Who are the sources? Is it independent? You read it and ask questions. What happens when you read something laterally? What happens when you see something laterally? Anybody laterally? What it means? Yes.
You skim it and you don't actually read all the details?
No. Well, that's okay, but you don't. You don't want to do that. It means...
We have another guest back
Yeah.
here.
Do you read between the lines?
Yeah, no. No. What do you do when you read laterally? Think about lateral. You leave it. You go elsewhere and you come back to it. You check other sources. This is how fact checkers work. Fact checkers will look at a story and they say, okay, let me go elsewhere and find out if I can verify or check out some of the claims in the story. Who else is making these claims? What do I know about the sources in the story?
You might notice in the readings that we give you for each civic forum, you have multiple different sources that have multiple different takes on a similar set of issues. That's reading laterally.
So if you read laterally, you went elsewhere, you would find out that there were immediate problems with this story. That isn't the Washington Post. They should have been more careful later, they apologized. So reading laterally means, now we're working with a middle school in Coney Island where every student in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we've adapted our curriculum for younger students. It has to start younger. It has to become second nature. They are reading laterally. They immediately, it's built into their DNA. So all of us, our educational system has to rethink the way we actually teach people to read and assess information. And if you read laterally, you'd find out we are all vulnerable. No matter how smart you think you are, we're vulnerable. Who is Paul Krugman? Who's Paul Krugman? Did you ever hear the name Paul Krugman? Yes.
He wrote my macro econ textbook.
He wrote your textbook. He's something else. What else?
Famous economist.
He's a famous economist. He won the Nobel Prize. He's a smart guy, and he's a columnist for the New York Times. And after a big storm in Puerto Rico, Hurricane Maria, he tweeted to all the people who follow him, cholera in a U.S. territory among U.S. citizens in the 21st century. Heck of a job, Trumpy. He obviously doesn't like Trump. So the tweet says, oh my God, what kind of country we are. We can't even protect our citizens from cholera. Only what? Only what? And he's smart. Only what? Only cholera was never confirmed. Conjunctivitis, yes. He was mortified. This, I want you to read what he then tweeted out and wrote in the New York Times. We are not immune. We all need some humility. You need to leave here with humility to understand that you too, if you are not really vigilant and you're sloppy and lazy, you can fall prey to this. All of us. It's not just people who you may think are not smart. And finally, last thing I'll tell you. It's crucial for you, and when you dialogue with people, this is so hard, to get people to challenge their assumptions. In 2006, researchers at Emory University decided to study Democrat and Republican brains. And so, it's true. So what they did was they brought people who felt strongly about George Bush, very strongly, who voted for Bush, into the room, and people who felt strongly about John Kerry, and they showed them videos that challenged the competency and the reliability and the integrity of the candidate they voted for. Very good videos. And they hooked up their brain to see what was happening inside their brain. Now, we have different centers in our brain for different kinds of activity. Give me some of the centers we have. Different functions of the brain. But what is it for?
The amygdala, it like regulates like.
Right, but we have critical thinking centers, critical judgment, we have memory centers, we have emotional centers, right? There are centers of the brain that have functions. So they wanted to see what was happening inside the brains of these people when they began to get these videos. What lit up like a Christmas tree? Emotion, of course. Oh my God, people are challenging my judgment? What do you, when people push you, what happens to you? What's your first reaction? Anger. It's almost an evolutionary response. Now, the researchers knew this. So they said, you know what? We're going to let these videos run for 18 minutes so we can see at what point the brain turns on the critical thinking functions, okay? Along that 18-minute spectrum. So when do you think it turns on? At what point? Never. 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 And when
18 minutes is also the
was,
length of TED Talks, which is interesting.
right. And by the way, when they did this kind of test on another issue involving politics in the Mideast with partisans who felt strongly about Israel and the Palestinians, and they got the same results, they said, well, let's do a subtest of people who are the most educated in this group. People who have more education, and in a pre-test, they knew more facts about this particular issue. But they were emotional, but they knew a lot more. What happens to the bias? Does it stay the same? Does it go up? Does it go down? These are the more informed people. They're emotionally involved, but they're informed and knowledgeable. What happens? What do you think? Anybody? Come on.
Does bias increase or decrease is
Or
the
stay the
question?
same.
Or
What
stay
do
the
you
same?
think? Why? What happens?
They already know it, and they feel like it's their point is obviously correct.
So they stay the same. They stay biased.
Their bias goes up.
Their bias goes up. So here's a scary thing. The smarter you are, the harder it is for you to move off a position if you're emotionally attached to it. I want you to think about that when you go out and you have to dialogue with students in your school. There are ways to mitigate this, by the way. If we had more time, we could do a whole session on how you try to overcome that, and I think it's something that you need to think about. So I want to give you a homework assignment. I haven't checked with Sanda.
Yes.
This is a site, if you haven't been to, that will test your biases in 5 minutes. So take this down. It's Project Implicit. You can take a series of tests.
We'll email it to you tomorrow.
Right. It will measure your bias about age, sexuality, ethnic groups, race, a whole 5 minutes. They'll give you a series of questions, and then they will tell you if you harbor some kind of implicit bias. By the way, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just tells you that we all bring a lot of biases that we have to overcome. You should definitely go on and take this test. And it may be something that's already used in your high schools, or maybe something when you dialogue with people would be a way to start without a threatening kind of conversation about how we all bring biases wherever we go. And by the way, obviously, what's really happening is that the ecosystem explodes. That once we get false information out on the internet, it's harder and harder to catch up with it. You probably didn't know that the Pope endorsed President Trump, Donald Trump, in the middle of the election. But there was a tweet from the Vatican saying that we're supporting the Pope. That tweet was retweeted 868,000 times. When the Vatican heard about this, the Pope said, oh my God, he said something, right? He said, we don't endorse any candidates. And they put out a correction saying, that was a fake tweet. How many times was that retweeted? Who's winning this war? MIT actually has quantified it and found that false information on Twitter moves 7 times faster than stuff that's been confirmed. So one of the real cautionary tales for you I leave you with is the idea is before you share anything to make sure that you're doing something that's important. Be an active consumer. And the last thing, I'm going to leave this, and you can pick up one later. If you are interested in learning more about news literacy, our curriculum, what we do, there are a couple of ways to do it. One, we have an online course on Coursera, which is a platform for educational courses. It's free, where you can come on and you can look at some of our curriculum and you can really get up to speed. The other thing I left you is you could pick up is we have a program at Stony Brook where we teach our undergraduate course in high schools for SUNY credit, okay? And your school can sign up, and you can actually wind up offering a course in news literacy as an elective in government. So I want you to take this and see.
We'll distribute these at the end of the forum today, make sure you have them, and we'll also email it in the follow-up email tomorrow or Tuesday.
So I apologize again for the compressed nature of this. Any quick comments or questions before we break? Everybody's all set to go, right? Good luck, and thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy.